Modern life is built on the back of fossil fuels. Our clothes, homes, offices, lights, heating and air conditioning, cars, roads, water bottles, the food we eat, the bed we sleep on, the screen where you're watching this, we're all built using fossil fuels. But the environmental toll is jeopardizing our planet, and the consensus is that we need to transition to renewable sources of energy. So how does a society built on fossil fuels change everything? And what will life be like when we're powered by clean and renewable energy?
When you turn on your lights in 30 to 40 years, if everything goes well, the energy to power your home, to get your electricity on, is going to be powered by renewables.
I'm pretty optimistic about renewable energy, but the question still remains, what will the decisions be that the private sector takes, that government takes over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years?
Before we envision what our lives will be like in the future, we need to go back over 250 years to see how the US and the rest of the globe got to this point where fossil fuels are so heavily relied upon.
Fossil fuels, including natural gas, oil, and coal, really powered industrialization. And most of our energy services actually still come from fossil fuels. It's the foundation of our economy.
Our energy consumption has grown tenfold since the turn of the 20th century. And in 2020, 79% of the energy we consumed was from fossil fuels.
It's not just about powering your car if you're driving using gasoline or diesel. It's not just about creating electricity for when you turn the lights on, but it's also about powering all sorts of manufacturing processes, industrial processes, and creating many of the objects that we have in our world around us.
Industrial manufacturing is the biggest consumer of energy at 33%. Followed by transportation, residential, and commercial.
It's literally everything. It's not just the grid, but it's how we get around. It's our food systems.
Fossil fuels contain carbon. When they're burned, that carbon combines with oxygen to create carbon dioxide. And that's leading to a thermal instability and a host of climate impacts ranging from severe weather to drought to wildfires, and really risking human livelihoods and even human life on this planet.
Since the beginning of industrialization in the mid to late 1700s, atmospheric concentration of CO2 has gone up nearly 49%. That's more than the increase of the previous 20,000 years. And in that time, Earth's average surface temperature has gone up 1 degree Celsius. A United Nations panel warned that warming above 1.5 degrees will lead to a further increase in extreme weather events, loss of biodiversity, and significant risk to human health.
We really need a societal shift, like a significant societal shift. We have already done enough damage to the atmosphere. We're going to see more intense storms. We're going to see more intense wildfires. We're going to see more intense rains. The renewable energy transition is about making sure it doesn't get that much worse.
Up until recently, there were really significant questions about whether we could transition to another foundation. This question has now been answered in that we have cost-competitive renewable primary energy in the form of solar and wind energy, and also in other types of renewable energy.
I think that a lot of places are going to see gas-powered stoves phase out, and this is a trend that's really picking up steam because natural gas is a fossil fuel.
If you're living in a city, investing further in really reliable, convenient public transport, making it pleasant for people to bike, or they choose to walk to work, they have a good environment to do that.
For those who drive, switching to electric vehicles is critical to lowering our carbon emissions. Americans consumed 337 million gallons of gasoline per day in 2020, and transportation made up 26% of energy consumption.
If you electrify vehicles, then you could potentially run those vehicles on clean energy that doesn't emit greenhouse gases.
As electric vehicles become the norm, the amount of charging stations will need to increase. In the bipartisan infrastructure agreement signed in November of 2021, $7.5 billion were targeted for the installation of 500,000 new charging stations across the country by 2030. But the transition goes beyond lifestyle changes. Construction materials like steel and concrete cause significant problems for the environment, making up 20% of global CO2 emissions.
When we think of the renewable energy transition and cleaning up our energy use, we think of like the Jetsons, or like living in some futuristic space. But it can be as basic as making sure the manufacturing processes for stuff like steel and concrete becomes cleaner.
Cleaner and also more efficient.
Battery technology is kind of the next frontier, and it's still being developed, so making sure that we have the batteries we need to store renewable energy when the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining.
Batteries have improved substantially. For example, lithium-ion batteries fell in cost by 97% over 3 decades. So these are really dramatic changes.
America is far from reaching a net zero carbon emissions economy. But over the last 20 years, innovation has driven renewable prices down and demand is up.
What we're seeing now is that energy markets are changing. Solar energy costs fell by 99% over 4 decades.
Hydro is a great source of baseload power. Hydro is generated generally from dams, so it's just the constant flow of water through these dams. Nuclear is also a great low source emissions of baseload power. So these power sources can kick in when the sun isn't out or when the wind isn't blowing. We have a lot of technologies right now that we can deploy at wide scale and really get a lot of this done.
If the transition is inevitable, and there is so much potential in renewables, then why is it taking so long?
The conversation around climate has been stuck for so long in whether or not it exists, which is an absurd question, and less on how do we make these really hard shifts.
To make the shift to renewables requires a big change in our behavior, as well as major investments in natural resources.
We're gonna need all sorts of new materials, lithium, cobalt, all sorts of like earth materials that we need to power electronics are gonna be in huge demand because we're just gonna need so much more of it to expand solar panels, to create EVs.
There are also questions around companies' commitment to real change.
There's a real market share value for putting a green label on something. There was a recent analysis of some major corporations' net zero plans that found that they were encouraging some of the brands that they own to cut corners as much as possible, like buy some offsets, like do some fudgy math because we really want the green label on some of our products. Those things don't fool the atmosphere.
Experts say there is room for both fear and optimism as we look toward the future of energy. However, with each passing year, the opportunity to stabilize the Earth's temperature becomes more difficult.
Climate change is a public health crisis. So when we talk about transitioning, it's about making sure that the world we're in doesn't get more catastrophic. Southern Africa just went through 2 big juiced up cyclones in a row, and there's also a drought going on that is really eliminating food supplies right now in Madagascar. Folks in Bangladesh are going to see their homes absolutely destroyed with sea level rise very, very soon.
The opportunity to live without the fear of climate change mitigation impacts, especially for the younger generation. If we imagine a future in which that worry has been addressed and has gone away, I think that's also a very significant positive change that we can look forward to.
It's hard to make the logical leap from installing a solar panel to making sure people are safe, but that's kind of what we're talking about here. We're talking about making sure the world keeps being habitable for humanity.